Good afternoon, everybody. We've made it almost to the end. We're almost there. So let's get to our last session of the day. We are managing configuration profiles with an interactive API script. Now, you've probably heard this before, but hearing it more than once is better than never hearing it at all. We are changing how we're doing the Q&A this year. So I'd like everybody to go ahead and open up the JNUC app and then navigate to the Q&A section and find this session. There you're going to go ahead and pose your questions so that we're able to answer them. Also, this is going to allow everybody who's joining us virtually to be able to ask our questions. Once we're done, I will come back up here and then pose those questions to Kendall Johnson. Take it away, Kendall.
Hello, my name is Kendall Johnson. This is managing configuration profiles with an interactive API script. This will be fun. All right, from Point Loma National University. We are a small liberal arts university, 90 acres on the Pacific Ocean, with a pretty great place to catch a baseball game if you're ever in the area. A little about me. Originally got into the Apple world with 5 years in Apple retail at the Genius Bar. I've spent the last 9 years in higher education support, 7 years specifically as our primary Mac admin. I love hiking, travel, burritos, and Jamf swag. All right. So just to set up some disclaimers of where we're going from here, some things to expect with today. Unfortunately, it is not a how to nudge or a how to use Jamf API session. There are a lot of great sessions out there that do that, a lot of great documentation and context. And yeah, so that won't be that. Oh, here, we're jumping forward. I have no formal scripting training, so that gives us 2 options. One, if you're also in the no formal training, didn't have a CS major or anything like that, then you can join along and say, hey, we can do this together. It also, if you do have formal training, you're gonna see stuff that says like, hey, that's probably not right. That's okay, I'm probably not doing it the right way. Part of it is exploring that together and getting the job done. So what that means is thank you. Whether it's people directly in this room or in general, Jamf Nation, Jamf Heroes, Mac Admin Slack, Stack Exchange blogs, and a million Google searches, thank you for teaching me how to script and how to be a Mac admin, because that's how I got here. And then other thing is we all have our own specific environments, things to be aware of. And so I don't want you to get hung up on why does my university do it this way, or why did you do the script this way? The goal is to just give you some nuggets within the script to walk away with, to say, hey, maybe I could use that little bit of code, or I can play with that and go from there. And then the script should be available in the session resources. I don't know what that looks like to download yet, but it is in a PDF form. So if you're trying to grab pictures and we get too quick, you will get the full exported version of it. All right, so jumping into some of our environment and constraints. We use an update model, what we just call the ring update model. So what that means is we have a layered approach of testing. So it starts out with ring 1, and that's our internal ITS computers on macOS. They're gonna get software updates right out of the gate. We wanna get them testing. The next ring is gonna be ring 2, and that's a kind of random selection of users and use cases, different departments, to get a better test case that ITS can't do. We may do things a little different, not use the same applications, so they're just our next layer of testing. And then ring 3, it goes to everyone else. In connection to this ring update model, we have we pair it with the macOS release schedule, to where if Apple were to release a software update today, then ring 1 has 7 days to update starting right now. So nudge is gonna give them 7 days to get that updated. Ring 2 is gonna start after that 7th day. They're gonna have their own 7 days to perform the update, to where paired with the software update deferral and nudge, they have that new window. And then ring 3 is the same idea, 7 days they have to complete, but they have a 14-day deferral window. Just to give a little bit of a visual, the top bars show when the nudge profile is applied and how long they have to complete that. And then the bottom lines indicate the software update deferral process that the Ring 2 and Ring 3 get to make sure that they're not seeing those software updates ahead of time. All right, so with that context, a couple goals that I went in when trying to address this specific process. First, I didn't want it to be dependent upon logging into the web console. It's just extra steps, and there's things that I'm just doing on a routine basis that to have to always click 10 things deep to be able to edit a profile, just get it automated. Next, I wanted to remove the need to update the specific manual fields every time. So if I know that a specific part is always changing, I don't want to have to make a typo on that or somehow mess things up when I'm really only needing to address those specific parts. And in terms of nudge, the two parts that I do change are the required date and the minimum OS that is required after that, at that date. With that, as you saw on the last screen, I've got a pretty good codified schedule of when it rolls out to my various rings. So I want it to line up to that process. I don't want to have to remember and try and track down, okay, when is Ring 2 going to hit? When's Ring 3? The process should line up together. And then with that, I want to be reminded, when is it time to go to Ring 2? It's been 7 days. What a lot of this spurred from pre-pandemic at my desk, I had a whiteboard behind me, and I would just keep track of a calendar back there and kind of slice through the days. I lost my whiteboard when I went home, so I had to come up with a new process. So that's where we are today. Some context of the nudge configuration profile within the Jamf Pro console. When first setting it up, I used the custom Jamf schema to be able to define the specific keys that applied to my department and my university and how we wanted to roll this out and the user experience. So I used the custom schema to kind of dial that in, but then afterwards, I just went and took the actual plist, copied it out, and did the upload. So that's the type of configuration profile that I am editing here today. All right. Scripting and API basic needs. So when thinking through the general ideas of what the script was trying to address, it needed to be able to go out and get the existing configuration profile that was out there. We're going to be able to use that data to update it into the new fields for those date and OSs. I want it to only edit the specific components that we need to look at. The scope doesn't need to change. It's always going to be applied at the computer level, so keep it as specific as possible. Then I wanted to actually push the configuration profile out. I don't want to have to go in and change, am I applying it to just new devices or scoping it out? How do I get it to everyone without having to log in? And then within it's a bash script, and I use functions. And functions, I wanted to be able to have modular components get reused over and over, rather than type the same thing 100 times, and if I need to change one little part, don't have to do it everywhere. Just kind of use as these blocks that I can build off of and call whenever they're needed. The API token, I want to be able to reuse that token, whether it's for this script running it multiple times, or I've got other scripts that can rely on a similar process. How do I keep that token reusable and in my terminal session without having to put in a password every single time? And then specifically the API permissions, trying to do a least privilege of have just the permissions we need. For this one, it's just macOS configuration profiles, the read and update capabilities is all that's needed. So when looking at starting this process, I like to go with almost like a table of contents. I don't know all the lines of code that are going to get me there, but I have the general ideas of how I'm going to accomplish the task I'm doing. So the outline I went with was, first, we got to deal with authentication. Ask me for my API password. If I have a valid token, confirm it. And if it's a bad token or if we don't have one, then go ahead and ask me for that password. It's going to ask what ring needs to be updated. So at this point in the process of rolling things out, are we dealing with ring 1, 2, or 3? If it's ring 1, that means Apple just released a new software update, and I need to tell it what that version is. So are we doing a 13.4.1? Is this a 13.5? Whatever it may be, this is what I want to input. When it comes to ring 2 and 3, I don't want to have to put that again because it's been a week or two, and I don't want to have to remember what version are we on. So what I want the script to be able to do is call out to ring 1 and say, hey, I already know the version. Let's grab it from that ring 1, and that's what's going to get applied to ring 2 and ring 3 when it comes time. We're going to, within the process, we're going to replace the required installation date and the required minimum OS versions, get those updated to those new fields. We then want to update that configuration profile, push it up into the Jamf Pro console, push it out to all of our existing scope so it actually gets enforced. And then last, I decided to try and use Apple reminders to remind me when that next ring needs to get updated. So because I've got that set schedule, it's going to be a week later when I need to do this. So I'll actually use an app and process I'm already kind of leveraging for my own productivity. Let's use that same tool. So how can we fit that within a script? So that's kind of the general idea of what we're going for. So before we jump into some of the specifics, here's a quick preview of what it looks like. So you call on the script. And the first time we're running it, it's not going to have a token, so it's asking for a password. This is me typing in a password. What ring do we need to work with? Is this 1, 2, or 3? What's that new version that we need to go start enforcing for ring 1? And at that point, my fleet is now pushed out to enforce and go forward. So let's kind of just break down what that went through, and then we'll look at the specifics of it. So the first thing it did was it went and just did a get command to go grab the existing configuration profile for ring 1. Then it's going to, within that profile, it's going to bring the information down to the local machine, and we're going to define what was the previous required version and what was the previous required date. And then once we have those two values, it's going to update it. It gives me a little feedback here saying before we were enforcing 13.4.1, it's now going to be doing 13.5. And then it's also going to be telling me what that new required date is. You'll notice it didn't ask me when is it due because it already knows the schedule that I need to follow. We'll look at the specifics of that. And then it gives me the feedback that it's actually pushed that configuration up. It's given me a valid response that it pushed the configuration out. And then it went and told me that we've created the reminder for ring 2 for macOS 13, and I'm good to go. So we'll just do a quick preview. What does it look like for ring 2? In this example, I already have a good token. So it's going to be able to just jump straight to what ring are we working with. Ring 2, it doesn't have any input for what macOS version we're dealing with. So it just runs from there. So in general, fairly similar process. It goes and gets the information, but this time it gets our previous versions from the ring 1 profile. Then it's going to define what it needs to replace. We're replacing the same idea, this one 13.4.1 to 13.5. Takes care of the date, pushes the configuration up and out. Sets that reminder for the next week. But then this one's different. I wanted to actually complete the reminder that told me to start that process that day. If I manually complete the reminder, that doesn't help me know that I've actually done it. So the script is going to be smart enough to say, hey, let's go grab that open reminder, resolve it, and move on. And then one run through with ring 3, same exact process of ring 2. It's just going to go grab that information. The only difference here is at the very end, it doesn't need to create a new reminder, it just needs to do the completion process. All right, so jumping into the specific components of the script, I'll often like to start my scripts with static variables, so things that I know that I'm going to be constantly calling upon throughout the process. Things like my URL, my username. Looking at the configuration ID numbers, those correlate with the specific parts of my ring 1, ring 2, and ring 3. You can jump to that next one. Sorry about that. We'll go forward a couple slides. Sorry about that. All right, and next forward. We'll grab the ID number just straight from the Jamf Pro URL. It's going to tell me directly within there, so that's where I know how to get those specific numbers if I've created them through the Jamf Pro console. And then down at the bottom, for my instance, we talked about how I do the 3 instances of 7 days. Maybe we need to adapt this process to have 3 days, then 5 days, then 2 weeks. By putting it in that part gives you the ability to have the script to adapt to the schedule. One thing to call out is whatever you do with your delays within Nudge, make sure that your software update deferrals pair. Nudge doesn't care if that version is available on the computer, it's gonna tell it to get there. I could tell my whole fleet to get to macOS 105. If that doesn't become available, Nudge is just gonna keep trying until they get there, even though they can't. All right, so API authentication. So here's our first function of actually getting that authentication. So here's where it prompts for the password. I'm using a read-s command, and that is giving it, just telling it to prompt for the password. The -s is gonna say, don't show the password when the person is typing that in, and that becomes our variable. The next part, it's going to, within the Jamf API, it wants to work with a base 64 encoded string, so that's what it's creating there. One thing I'll call out on the last one was it's using the unset command. Because I've put in the password and it creates the encoded string with the base 64, I no longer need that password. So I'm gonna tell my script, forget it. That way it's not just hanging out in my cached variables just in case my machine's compromised. I mean, theoretically we're good, but it just doesn't hurt to not remember that when you don't need it. My next function here is looking at getting the actual authentication or getting the token itself. And then the last one there on the screen is using that token to get an HTTP reply code. And that code is gonna tell us, is the token actually good? If it at that point doesn't know the username and password, if it's actually good, maybe I gave a typo, so we wanna do some quick verification. All right, so we've got those functions created that we're gonna call on. And then here's just within the script is how it's gonna start this process. So at the beginning, it is going to see, did I get a 200? And that's that HTTP response, did I get a 200? If so, that means the token worked, so let's move on. But maybe it didn't, so we need to give a response to the user saying, hey, it's either a bad or missing token, that password is incorrect, something along those lines. So it's gonna run through those functions to do the authentication process. And then we wanna just check one more time, is this good? If it doesn't come back that second time, then we're just gonna go ahead and exit out, let them know, hey, APA password's incorrect, try again. They can call the script again to go from there. All right, so one thing within this, within my demo of the videos, you see I didn't type out the full path of my script. So in this example, the script is sitting on the desktop. So I'm within the zshell run command file, which is in a hidden file within your user directory. You can create aliases so that as opposed to typing my full path, I'm just gonna type nudge update or demo or whatever I wanna have as my shortcut. And then that way, anytime I do that, it autofills the full path. The other thing I added is the sourcing at the beginning of the script. By adding that, that was the trick to be able to have my token be reusable in between sessions. So as long as I'm in the same terminal session, I can call the script multiple times and that token becomes usable every time throughout. But also, I've unset a lot of the unnecessary variables that I don't need. That way that those don't get carried on. All right. So, ring one. So within my flow, I've got some if-then statements to say, if you choose ring one. I'm gonna go through, and the first thing it needs to do is, based on it being ring one, we need to define a couple things. So it's gonna go and grab the variables up top of, we're dealing with a 7-day delay. Then once we've got that defined, we're gonna come down and say, what is this new version? Because ring one doesn't know what the new macOS version that Apple has released, so it's gonna prompt for that. It doesn't need to be a secret, so there's no -s. We're gonna do a couple more definitions of the configuration ID, and for sake of the verbiage, saying this is specifically macOS 13. And then it's gonna go ahead and do those git commands. Go reach out, grab that information from Jamf of what that configuration profile is, define what the previous minimum operating system is. It's gonna define the required date. And then here's where that ring delay comes in, is it knows from now, how many days are we adding? By default, I do 7, so therefore 7 days from now is gonna be my delay date. It's gonna update the date, push it up, push it out, and then on that last step, create my reminder in a week to come back and take care of the next one. All right, so if I choose ring 2, it's a week later, it's time to do this process all over. Pretty similar process, except it needs to start out by going and getting the information from ring 1. So that means we need to reset. I chose ring 2, but I need to redefine and say I'm going to go get ring 1 data. Get that, what was that previous minimum OS? I'm going to define what the new minimum OS needs to be by what the old one was from ring 1. And then now I need to reset my variables because now it's time to act as ring 2 again. Go and get the information from ring 2. What are my delays? What's my ID? And then from here, it's the same process we looked at before. So we're just going to go ahead and get the ring updates, push it out. And then here, we're going to first create the reminder for next week, but then also take care of that last reminder by completing the reminder that was due today. And then ring 3, same process we did for ring 2. It's going to get the information based on ring 2. It's going to update all of the ring 3 information. And then as opposed to creating a new reminder and completing it, it just needs to complete it, so no creation of that new reminder. All right, we will jump into a couple of the specific functions that get used within that workflow. Starts out with the process of, because we always, we're going to always start with getting the configuration profile. And so within this, I start by creating a local directory. The process that really worked for me, especially in my development process of this script, was to have files written to locally so that as I'm manipulating and parsing them, I can see the file that it's playing with, and it's not just a variable that I have to keep piping out, testing, piping out. Make it a local file, put it in a temporary directory, and then at the end of the script, it just goes and deletes that directory and clears out all the files that was used in this temporary case. Here's just the straight command of what it needs to get the configuration profile itself based on the ID number that we've already defined. And then it's just going to pipe it out to a file. And it just looks like in all of this chaos. To me, it's not very readable. Somewhere in there, I can zoom in and see the specific information that I'm dealing with. And so we'll get a zoom in on that. And then these are the two fields. There's my date and there's my OS. That's what we got to work with. But based on my skills within scripting of knowing how to use grep and all these things to find that file, I found it where I wanted to parse it to look like a plist that I'm used to, like the plist that sits on my computer. So I create this big long thing. And this where, if you're a more veteran scripter, this could probably be done better and cleaner, but this works. Would love feedback, but I got there and it's working every day, so we're okay with that. So just to jump through the couple steps that it goes through, it's going to start by just catting the file. We're going to give it a format, and that's within this field. The part in yellow is the actual plist. That's what the computer is going to use as a reference to start enforcing nudge. All the data above and below is specific to the configuration profile. The name, it's applying at the computer level, what's the scope, all those kind of things. But I only care about that plist in the middle. So I'm just going to go through a series of things of looking for that specific line. I'm going to do some sed commands to take out components at the beginning and the end. I'm going to do some of the cleanup of the HTML with the less than or greater thans. I want it to look like a plist I'm used to. And then we're going to do a whole bunch of those, get it formatted one last time, and it starts to look like something I've seen before. There, I can work with that. So we did all that work so that on this next screen, when it's going to get the previous minimum OS version and the required date, I can know that if I look for the OS version, if I do that grep, 2 lines down from it, it's going to find my OS version. 5 lines down, it's going to grab my date. So that's those previous dates and OS versions that I'm working with that I need to replace. All right, so here's where we look. You'll notice now that I'm working with the old unformatted, with the HTML style, with the LT and GTs and all that. And that's because when I need to upload this back to Jamf, they don't want it pretty. They want it how they had it. So I'm actually modifying the original components unedited. I just did all that parsing to be able to find it a little quicker for my skills at the time. Sorry about that. And then I'm just doing a sed command. Same process for the date. Using that string, the long strings, to do a sed commands to get it swapped out. And once again, I keep writing it to a local file, because that file is what we're going to be working with to push back up here in a second. All right, so updating the configuration profile. So we're doing a curl put with a -t. That -t is saying use that local XML file that I've been writing out and manipulating. That's what we're going to push back and have it overwrite. And then the second line, this was the fun one. I don't believe this is documented, so it's still working. Shout out to Brad Chapman who put it in macadmin Slack. The previous version of how I did this is I was actually doing multiple put commands to say put it up without a scope and then put it with the scope again to kind of trick it to thinking that, hey, there's a new scope, you need to push it out. It didn't have great results. This put command has been far more successful in providing that consistent push out. All right, we'll jump through a couple of the create reminder options. This was also just a straight Google search. Didn't know it was even possible. I think I searched bash create Apple reminders. And so it starts out by getting a couple definitions based on, or a couple variables based on the ring. It's going to be reminding me for the next ring. So you'll see it just takes the ring I chose and adds a +1. This part here, I only want to be reminded Monday through Friday. So in some examples where maybe I want to remind 3 days later and not my 7, if it happens to come down on a Saturday, go ahead and add 2 days to that ring delay so it happens on a Monday. If it's going to happen on a Sunday, add 1 day so it falls through a Monday. I don't have it considering holidays. It might get me on Labor Day if it happens to fall that way, but I'm okay with that as long as it doesn't hit me every weekend. The reminder list name. So within the Apple Reminders app, you can have different lists to organize your reminders and different things. Maybe you've got a personal and a family. This list name needs to already exist in the Apple Reminders app for it to be able to write to. So whatever you put in this variable here, it needs to be exactly the same as what you have actually existing in your Reminders app. Then we're going to come down based on our delay date, and we're going to create what that new required date, or what my reminder date is going to be. Being on from San Diego and Pacific Standard, usually Apple updates come out around 10. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for CDNs to populate and that it actually becomes viewable. Wait till I'm done with lunch. So I usually have it remind me 1 o'clock just by default. And then I say, what is the actual text of the update going to be? So when I look on my phone or my computer, it's going to tell me, hey, update nudge ring 2 for macOS 13. All right, so before we actually run it, the process I found uses the OSA script function to write this out to the Reminders app. When you do that, it's going to actually open the Reminders app if it wasn't already open. So I wanted to add some logic to be able to say, hey, was it already open? And we'll see at the end where that comes into play. This next chunk is just putting all together the date, the time, and the text that we did to say, hey, go ahead and tell the application reminders to tell the list, macOS updates, to be at this time, this date, and this text. Then that next part is going to come down and just do some if-then statements. Was the app open based on what I checked before? If it was open, then I was probably using it for something, so go ahead and leave it open. But then if it was closed, just run a quick quit command because I didn't want it open. I don't need it in my dock anymore. So that's our creation process. And then now to complete. Similar process, but it needs to use the existing ring. If I'm in ring 2, it needs to complete the ring 2 reminder. So that's where we're defining there. It's going to look for that text of what the reminder is named. And then in the completion process, I wanted it to look for any reminders that were due today or before, and it needs to actually complete it as of today. So with the Reminders app, when you do it via script, you can't say just complete it. I have to say complete it with the timestamp of that current date right there. So that's how we get there. And then same idea, if the app was open, leave it open. If not, go ahead and quit it out. All right. That was a lot of work. Why did we do all that? Well, hopefully, with this next slide, going back to our original demo, because it can be a complex, annoying process to log into the console, put in your password there, find which specific configuration profile, edit the specific fields, when really it can just be a matter of answering a couple quick questions, and we're now enforced and up to date. So, a couple benefits of why we would work with the scripted workflow. Reliability, efficiency, and consistency. We hopefully know the reasons why we automate, take as much human interaction and simplify it as much as possible. I wanted to be able to utilize reminders to stay on top of my scheduling, use something I've already got. Tools to pass on, not only for hopefully sharing a little part of it that the Mac admin community can play with, but it's also a tool I can give to maybe people behind me or on my help desk that I can trust to say, hey, you can run this process. You don't need to know all the intricacies of Jamf. You can do this process just by answering a couple quick questions. Taking that complex process and simplifying it down, keeping it manageable. So maybe you don't want to take this script. You want to use something similar. So some tips on how to tackle a similar project. First off, don't start from scratch. A lot of what I did was taking little snippets that I saw on Jamf Nation or anywhere it may be, compiling it together. You don't have to know everything from the beginning. Work off the shoulders of others. I like to break everything down into smaller bites. If I had to think that I was going to write this huge script in one sitting or think of everything that was necessary, pretty overwhelming. Just start with, okay, I need to be able to do a curl command to get a configuration profile, and then run from there, one Google search at a time. Document as you go. So as you're creating a line of code, maybe you had specific logic that made sense on that day. Help yourself in the future, help whoever comes behind you to provide the logic of what that line's supposed to do and why you did it that way. It's also a great way if you need to take a break at the end of the day. Comment out, this is where I'm stopping, this is what's still broken, this is what I was hoping to do next. Just kind of give you that launching point from when you're going to jump to. And then hopefully you saw in my demos, echo to leave breadcrumbs. So give just little responses of, hey, I'm doing this right now. I'm updating from 13.4.1 to 13.5. Give yourself that feedback. It's also helpful in the test process to echo out maybe variables. Why is this erroring out? Why am I not getting anything? We'll go and just echo the variables you're creating along the way to provide that context for yourself. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendall. So we've had some questions come in. Let's see what we've got here. And by and large, the most popular question was, what does your process look like for rings when 0 days happen?
Yeah, that's a messy process. Because at that point, we not only have to, if we need to increase the speed, it's a manual process of changing our delay, our deferrals, our software update deferrals. Ideally, that would get codified to say, maybe I have a process of, hey, hit 9 for 0 day, and then it kind of live reacts and changes the delays and all those things. But that's not currently codified, at least.
The other question that I saw on here is Nudge a safe tool? It's an open source tool. People's security teams have issues with open source tools.
Yeah. I guess I can't speak to the specifics of it being safe. I can speak to the community that uses it. I guess should have given thanks. I believe Eric Gomez is the main developer on that. I'm blanking on where he works, but it's a company that's a lot bigger and has a lot better security policies than my local university. So if they're okay using it, and as well as open source gives your security team the ability to inspect it. They can say whether it's safe or not.
So we've had one question.
Sorry, I think he was trying, I didn't hear that, but Uber, yes, Eric at Uber.
Uber.
Pretty big company, yeah.
We might have heard of Uber. So if you had run into any issues with configuration profiles sitting in pending?
Not with this, I believe. With that put command, it should overwrite. So let's say it's a computer that's been off for an entire OS update cycle. It should just get that updated, whatever the most recent push.
And the last question that we have, these slides, you may have mentioned that. Are they available in your resources for download?
I don't know if I uploaded the slides. They're not there. Okay, my Mac admin's username on Jamf Nation and Slack is my first name, middle initial, and last name, so Kendall J. Johnson. If you want to hit me up, if that's something that would be helpful, I can share that out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody, for joining us
Thanks
today.
so much.